This is the first video of my revised online A to Z project finance modeling course. There are going to be a number of videos. And here's kind of the story behind this video. When I made my book on financial modeling, look what somebody said. I bought your book on a hard copy as per the picture. He proved he put his book on an email. This was an email. Few chapters in and I'm off backpacking next week. He didn't want to carry the book, but he still wanted to read it. Oh my gosh. So this book that I made, I started making videos with the book. And I didn't know what I was doing. I bought this Camtasia studio and I put music in the background because I couldn't stand my voice. And then my dog barked and then I swore too much. And the most important thing, the videos were not very well structured. They were not very well explained. They didn't go through the theory before I went through the analysis. They were kind of just Excel based and pretty boring. So my friend Federico, he's wonderful. He said, he took my class for just 2 days. And then he tried looking at the videos and he said, well, I guess you were right. They didn't really work. My other friend, David Lee, who this Excel will be named after, he actually wanted an online certificate. I kind of advertised for this and I said, I give you a certificate. I'm not going to give you a certificate from now on. I'm giving you, if you actually finish some of this stuff, and I really see it's not crap, that you really did some work, I am going to give you a letter of recommendation and put your name on the website. Oh my gosh. Okay. Here's what I'm trying to do in this next whole set of videos. I want to teach modeling, of course, but also why you model, why you present things, what a model is, what the philosophy of modeling is, a little bit deeper, more than just typing formulas in Excel, please, much, much more. And in this, a little bit differently than before, I am going to look at some real models and see that we could improve them. So here's some of the topics. It's kind of a standard kind of project finance. I'm going to talk in this video about a couple of little tools. But then go through some timelines. And hopefully, and the whole idea of pre-marriage and pre-COD and post-COD. The whole thing about how you start with what the machine actually does, whether it's a toll road, a oil field, a hotel, a gold mine, a solar project, whatever it is, you got to understand how much it's going to produce and what's capacity or anything you're doing in any kind of business. And then we go through, well, once we have how much you have of the stuff, how'd you get paid for it? Do you have contracts for it? How'd you get the operating cash flows? No debt, no debt, no debt yet. And then we go through depreciation just to allocate the CapEx. And go through a little complicated stuff with depreciation. And then we put in a balance sheet. We put in all the financial statements and make sure our balance sheet balances without any debt. And then we start adding all sorts of debt issues. We start with risk analysis where debt is given. Put a DSRA and MRA and cash sweeps to help us, even if you don't know what that is, don't worry. And then we do our structuring and sculpting, and we take a debt contract and try to optimize it. And then we do refinancing. It should say that. And finally, sensitivity analysis. Okay. I'm trying to make this online better. Much, much better. I think, even though I don't like PowerPoints and don't do them very well, I think we need to start with these and start with the theory and start with the structure before we touch any Excel. So this video is going to just start with nothing. No, I might open an Excel in a little while. Now, you might say, I am so good. I'm one of these really good modelers. I don't need to look. I want to look at your advanced things, your your fancy things about whatever, putting letter of credit fees in a sculpting equation or something like that. I don't want to look at this. I understand all this. I make really fancy models already. But I'm going to show you. I think my friend gave me some fantastic presents. A whole bunch of models, and I looked over them at first. I thought, oh, these are artistic. Oh, they're beautiful. But then you see, there are a lot of things you could do better. And that goes for me worse than anybody else. I made mistakes a lot, and there are a lot of things to do better. And a lot of them are just simply making things more transparent, more flexible, and all that stuff. I'm also going to go through all these UDF templates, not only the circular references, how to make the depreciation on future CapEx with different remaining lives more accurate, how to get this interpolate function, how to get an LLCR, even if you have no idea what I'm talking about, how to get that moving forward when you've got multiple debt issues with different interest rates, tricky issues that Excel isn't really good enough for. And then I'm going to talk about when we go through some of the unintuitive kind of results. Let's say, you have some development fields which increase the cost of the asset. You don't pay for it. You're the developer and the sponsor. So you might think, I love a high project cost. I'm going to get more debt, but you don't get more debt because the DSCR drives it. And if you have a development fee and you write up an asset, when you write up an asset, there is income, and if that income is taxed, the development fee hurts your project, not helps it. Well, let's start with religion. Modeling religion, of course. Start with a few functions and tools and all this stuff. And here's the thing I talk about a lot. I stole this, of course, from F1, F9. I suppose, whatever. I'm not going to advertise it for them for sure. But, I think these standards apply to your life. Maybe there are a couple of other ones too that I'll come back. You should be efficient. Efficiency is not in here. But fasty, maybe I should put. Fast, flexible. You should be flexible with your life. You should be able to move when the world moves. You should be able to adapt to new technologies. Blah, 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 blah. For modeling, flexible for me in courses, be able to move with the students and not just be a boring old outline that's just so bad. But flexible in modeling means you should be able to have different timing scenarios, different financing techniques. All of that should be easy. You can add a refinancing just like with a snap of your fingers. The worst on flexibility is no copy and paste macros that don't allow you to use one of the best things in Excel, which is a goal seek. No, don't say your model is flexible if you have copy and paste macros, because it's not. I shouldn't get so excited and so over rambling. Accurate or appropriate, I don't know which it is. You Google it, I think it says appropriate, accurate. Your life should be accurate. You should, I suppose, be as accurate as possible. In some situations, I think it's okay to lie a little bit. What the heck? But, and you should, appropriate, I guess, is a nail and a hammer. Don't you find the right tool for the job, and you don't make things absurdly detailed when they don't need to be, and you don't follow bureaucratic rules, maybe. Oh, that's what appropriate is. Balance, she has to balance, because that's the most exciting thing in life, really. Well, maybe not quite. Structured, best feeling. The model should be structured. Your life should be structured. You should make those little lists of things, your task list. You should structure everything. Do it in the right order. It's really separating the balance sheet from separate the financing from the operations. That's what it really, really means. That's what it means. And keep the assumptions in the same place as separate the operating assumptions from the financing assumptions. Get a timeline all nice and structured. But sometimes structured conflicts with flexibility. In my life, it does. I try to keep things perfectly structured, and then I can't be flexible anymore. Ah, that's more philosophy, I suppose. Transparent is really the so cool. You can't have long equations. I've moaned about those forever. Now my new moaning is that you should have, I have seen so many poor people who read models, and I've said that my one person from my class said, "I'd rather be sitting on a bed of nails than looking at other people's models," and he said that because you have to have these little blue following lines, precedent, because why wouldn't you keep the debt and the cash flow on the same page and the sources and uses on the debt schedule on the same page? You need to see a nice, beautiful flow. That's part of being transparent. There are other things too. I'm already getting too emotional about these things. What does it really mean to have a flexible model? I already kind of said any date, any construction, any PPA. We all know that. No limits on goal seek from copy paste. I've already rambled about that. All these operating strategies and financing strategies. What happens if we have a merchant period and we want to lower our operating costs and all that and look at real options? Those are part of being flexible and be able to just have a scenario analysis, just snap right in there, make all kind of cool little graphs and artistic stuff. Appropriate here, I'm just kind of trying to re-emphasize what I said. For me, a Google map is like a financial model, and a Google map says it takes 20 minutes to get there, and the first time you do it, for me it takes an hour when it said 20 minutes. Second time, maybe half an hour. Third time, it gets me on time. Third time, I finally get the model right. That's kind of like project finance. It takes a while. You got to look at that sponsor. You got to see if they've done it before in the industry before, blah, blah, blah. But if you have a Google map and you really want to not get lost, you might have to really focus on this. You might have to really find the detail. Or you might want a much bigger map. It depends where you're going and what you're using it for. And I've already talked about the balance sheet. Make the balance sheet and start the balance sheet early. And don't put all these other. I've seen them all with 400 tests, 400 checks. They must have had a check of the checks. Oh my gosh. The big ones, the balance sheet and the debt going down to zero. Those are the big ones. And the circular reference or the UDFs really working. And a test on whether those things are working. Those are the three you really need. Put all these other ones in to show how cool you are. Good. But get those in right at the beginning. Now, moving to structuring. Modigliani and Miller, they won the Nobel Prize, and Miller was a nice man. I met him. I'm just bragging because I met him one time. He didn't have any idea who I was. Obviously, I was a student. But his big thing was, if we have a business, we can't just snap our fingers. We can't do any magic to reduce risk. Anybody who says you can somehow reduce risk instead of transfer risk, well, I think they're generally it's really crap. Maybe you can parse off the risk to those able to accept it, and maybe then they'll do a better construction job. Okay, fine. But the basic idea and the key output from his is keep the financing. You can't make financing magically reduce risk, increase. Yet you don't. Financing and operations are separate. I just made it bad, but that's in the model. Keep the financing and operations separate. That's the big thing from Modigliani and Miller. Of course, you don't believe him that debt is irrelevant. Debt is so important because debt provides a stamp of approval. Debt provides an outsider telling you whether your project has too much risk. Debt is so important, it's unbelievable. So they were wrong about that. They were right about separating operations from financing, and that's what you need to do in the structuring of a model. And when you structure the debt, both the inputs and The analysis should start with debt size, move to funding, move to repayment, move to interest, move to debt projections. And then all the outputs, needless to say, have to be in a separate page. You can delete any of the output pages without affecting anything, that kind of stuff. Still on the structure. Okay. Set up the assumptions in the same order as you set up the model. Kind of already said that. Put just a few key elements of the timeline on the top and use the mouse. Don't be one of these idiots who says, oh, you can never use the mouse. That's ridiculous. Use whatever is best. Use the tool which is best. Okay. Oh, that's enough. And this is kind of another one about structuring. It's kind of a little bit repetitive. I apologize for that. Same order as the inputs. Keep the timeline in sight. All the core models on one page. Now, when you do your timelines or when you think about things, don't just use bureaucracy. You say, everybody does construction monthly and operations semi-annual, something like that. Well, think about why you're doing things and think about what makes sense. Don't use horrible rules. The reason people have monthly construction is because the interest expense goes up each month. IDC, I don't care. Interest expense. After you finish construction, you can't have a monthly model that pretends that debt gets paid down each month because the debt actually only gets paid semi-annually and the interest stays there and steps down each 6 months. So you want to reflect the interest expense. The reason you do that is interest expense. If you have a tax-sensitive transaction and taxes are paid quarterly, make a quarterly model. That's why you're doing it. Understand why you do it, not just follow some arbitrary rules. In terms of structuring now, structuring the inputs, here's my big mistake. I used to always put kind of scenarios inside the input page. That is bad. Put the scenarios in a separate page. It can be a horrible looking page. It can be a rough looking page. Put the scenarios separately and make sure that you can just insert a sheet and do the scenarios quickly. Don't mix them up. I mix them up way too much. Transparency. Somebody else showed this kind. It's not mine. I didn't find this formula. I found a lot almost as bad. But that's just the biggest crime of all. You think you're really smart after you do a formula like that. You're really the biggest idiot of all time. There is no excuse. The longest formula should be basically a lookup function. Maybe a max and min function. And maybe a little max and min times some switch or something. That's as long as a formula should be. Whenever, almost whenever, not in just financial modeling. When you get to a long formula and you think, I could only do it this way, you are wrong. There are easier ways to do it. Okay. Don't put too many pages. I've already babbled on about this, but when you put your switches on a separate page, all your time switches, or you call them masks. Oh, that's a fancier word. Or flags. I don't know. You put them on a different page, and then what the heck? You have to then go to the other page to find these switches and make a blue line to figure out where the switch was, when you could have just put the switch and told exactly how you're computing that switch on the same page. How idiotic it is to put switches on a different page, which I used to do. I'm sorry, I did, until I said, what is this? Okay. In terms of transparency, there are so few models that show what really drives the cost structure of a project. In electricity, it's obvious. The cost per kilowatt of constructing a project. In a road, the cost per kilometer. In oil, the cost per the reserve. Why don't you show the cost and then the O&M costs per unit, fixed and variable and total, and how much capacity you're using over time, or the capacity factor, or the decline rate, the 3 or 4 key factors that really determine the economics of the project. How could you make a summary page that doesn't have this? But it's not there. And what's the total real cost of the project compared to other projects? Now, these days in electricity, everybody loves LCOE, levelized cost of electricity. How could you not put that at the first page? Okay. Now, in this set of videos, I'm going to include some advanced issues. So if you think you're too good for this, fine, I don't care. Whatever, it's free. But we'll talk about all kind of fiscal year analysis and getting a simple formula for flexible days. I've never really done. We'll use this interpolate function. We'll, do some tricky things with taxes and depreciation, development fees. I want to make this, my objective is to make this UDF for circular reference resolution really, really easy. That's my whole idea. I really, really want to do that. I want to show you kind of the economics of some of this stuff, like the MRA, maintenance reserve account. When does it make sense to have it as part of the O&M contract or inside the project? So you can read the rest of these things. How to make absolutely sure you put refinancing in, which is hardly ever in, at least a banking model. I think bankers should look at it to understand what the real IRR is and what happens if you sell a project. Okay, here's how it's going to work. There's a file called David Lee. He's the one who asked for this. Okay, and for each separate section, starting with a timeline, there'll be a little thing that just has a few assumptions. No titles. So the best thing is for you to enter all the titles yourself, or I put the titles in a separate page, but no calculations. And then I put all the calculations in a third page. So you can do three things. Take this one and try to do it all yourself. Stop the video when I get to this. I'll continue the video and go through the titles, and then I'm not going to type them in. And then I'm just going to put in the formulas. That's kind of like the answer sheet. I think it would be best if you don't do an answer sheet. And in the future, I'm going to make much more complicated videos, I hope. Well, somewhat more complicated, advanced things on everything from really doing circular reference resolution completely yourself without any template models or anything, to reading from the internet, to corporate modeling issues, to whatever. Okay? And here's my only rule, lazy rule. Find the laziest way to do that. There are always 100 different ways to do things in Excel. You find the absolute laziest way. That's the rule. And there are two files to open. There's a read PDF to Excel, which I'm not going to use that much in this one. I use that much more in corporate model. And there's this generic macros, which some people, I think, have taken. Or maybe Shift Control R is so obvious that people do it. I have the coloring one. You got to enable the macros. It should say Control Alt C on the bottom to make the graphs. And then, just to illustrate, I'll illustrate one kind of thing here. So, here's what I did. So let's say we'll just use our lookup function, because I'm going to go crazy with the lookup function. And I'm going to say there's only some if lookup and index. Okay. And you could put equal lookup. And when I'm looking up on this year, don't worry about this. And I could only take this. This is kind of our input. Then on our lookup, it could be maintenance or something that increases for these days. So we look up on the date and correspond to this little table. I'm not VLOOKUP or HLOOKUP are way obsolete. You'd never use those. And then oh no, I got to edit that out. Hopefully, maybe I won't. F4, and then we lock it in. And you might think, okay, that's a way to use the lookup. Now, I happen to have this generic macros open. Here's what happens when you open it, and they're flexible inputs, and You can initialize it. You don't really have to. And it's got these different functions. And it's got a whole lot of stuff inside the macros. And I keep updating this. This is one I update very regularly and I put up. And it's not so hard, you know. I'll talk about how to use it a little more. And then I can press Shift Control R because that's one of the functions. Big deal. And then so this goes up in September of 2019. It better go up. And then it goes up after that and blah, blah, blah. That's the lookup function. And what I've done is I said, okay, let's do the lookup function instead by saying equal lookup. And this is the laziness example. It's a lot easier to just press this one, click on the whole line, click on the whole line. You don't waste time with F4s. And then I have heard in my classes, the famous word, oh, that makes the model heavy. That makes the model heavy. So what I do is I say, let's take this whole thing out and let's see how big the size of the model is. And this is typical. I give you a little function that shows. This shows the size of the size without the lookup. Here it is. Here's the size. I don't know. I must have increased the size by putting these things in. Okay. Now let's push the lookup in and do it with the this method. Okay. Enter. Did I do wrong? I'm sorry. Lookup. Oh my gosh. And I'm not swearing. Lookup. That one. This one. This one. Just be lazy. Okay. Oops, Shift Control R. It was okay. Shift Control R. And then we see how big the model is with the, oh, I should have put the last one in. It went to 56. So I copy and paste. There's a better way to do these. I have kind of an automated way to do these scenarios. Let's take this out again. Let's put Shift Control plus. Maybe we Control minus. Whoops. Control minus and put the size in without it so we can see how big this function increased the size of the model. So copy and edit, paste specialist values. I'm trying to just show you a little lookup. This is not a very well structured and well introductory video really. And then I put equal lookup and then we say, okay, this time let's do this one where we stop it. So we don't use the entire line because, oh, I don't use the, I'm used to using the F4. Okay, and then we try it again. Shift Control 1, Shift Control R, and then we put the size test in again. And you would think, well, maybe when you use that, thing where you go through the whole line, that's going to waste a lot of space. And it didn't. We got the same answer. We got the same answer when we tested it. Sometimes when you do this, you get a little different answer, by the way. But this gives you essentially the size of the file. And then you can go back and look at the size here. It's just about the same time. Sometimes it doesn't give you right. And this gives you a little macro. The macro I used are the functions I did to do it. This one does a time test, and it shows that the lookup with the entire line or the match index, they all take about the same time. So this laziness did not make the file heavy. And this file where you can test all sorts of different kind of things, this is on the Google Drive. I keep on talking about this Google Drive. This Google Drive, that's my travel schedule, sorry. This Google Drive is now in Chapter 1, Folder L, and I have model size. I have a lookup test. I kind of show you just how to make tests of all sorts of things and see if our lazy way hurts in any way. So far, it did not. And that's the end of the first video. That was just I introduced just one or two tools, and it's not really the end. Again, I lied. I wasn't quite accurate because I'm just going to show you kind of how this works. I create a timeline, show you really bad things about a timeline. This is a really big bank, a gigantic American bank. And they put some stuff in quarterly and stuff in yearly, and this yearly affected the quarterly. It was unbelievable how bad it was. This other one, it's a big thing too. They put a well. Look at that. There's no reason for that formula. This one had a fixed thing in a timeline. How horrible is all this? Look at this. These formulas in the timeline. Oh my gosh! And then we go through and how to exactly get something a little more complicated, which is, how to get this painful fiscal year thing done really easily. And then we go through, and this time I use lookup and interpolate a little bit to show you bad examples again. And then I work through each of these, and we're going to work through I guess it's we if you pay any attention to this. So it goes on and on and on. It does really, doesn't it? And how to do some more complicated things with tax depreciation when you have this remaining life vintage stuff. And what are the development fees? And why you'd ever do something as stupid as this. Oh my gosh. And why the formulas would be so long. So it just shows you kind of step by step. Each one of these is going to be a separate little video. Of course, the PowerPoint slides and this file that will be the base file. Where is it? Oh, it's not even on here yet. This file that has everything in here, it is named David Lee because he asked me about doing this. So there'll be a little titles. Then we'll put the free whatever the titles for the timelines, the titles for doing the physical analysis, the free cash flow, the taxes, all the financial statements before debt, then the debt, which is where it starts to get into circular references. So I've tried to actually do something here where I've done it ahead of time, and I'm not just kind of doing it on the fly and making mistakes. I've tried to practice just a little bit.